Hey, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be looking at the recently buffed Great Hammers. So in patch 1.09 we got some speed buffs, and these weapons just feel so much better than they did before. They actually feel viable, especially the one-handed moveset. I really enjoy that. So we're going to be taking a closer look at these with some invasions and duels. If you want to see the build, it's going to be at the end of the video. Before these invasions and duels start, I did just want to mention, if you wouldn't mind considering subscribing, I'd appreciate it. Also, I am very excited about patch 1.09. I know my content has been a little bit slow. I've still been under the weather and just kind of recovering. So yeah, let's go ahead and just jump into the invasions. Alright, so jumping into our first invasion, we have a nice little trio here in the catacombs, and there's definitely a couple different things to be worried about here. So we have obviously the very high damage associated with jumping attacks that might come from the dual Giant Crusher setup. So I'm trying to focus on that player just kind of immediately, see if we can kind of take that potential one-shot out of the equation. However, they're not really going for the jump attacks, which are pretty easy to punish, but it does also mean that it's a little bit harder for me to get the kill off pretty quick. So I kind of go back and regroup. We're also getting some bleed incantations coming our way, so it's important to not get caught by that and not get bled. And then we have a little bit of PvE that runs in and just delivers a couple hits, so I don't mind that chip damage coming in from the little imp there. And I'm able to just kind of recover again, take a step back, and also apply some buffs, eat some crab. And now I've kind of got a new target. I've decided that the Giant Crusher player is probably not going to one-shot me, and I might be able to get a quick kill here on the player that's going for the Thorn incantations. And I'm actually able to just kind of do a strafe backstab, run around, and grab that kill very quickly. They didn't have very much health, so that really helped out there. And now it's a little bit easier. I can focus more of my attention on the player with the Giant Crushers. And the host is doing, I wouldn't say necessarily a good job of protecting their Phantom, but they are definitely getting in the way at some opportune moments. They have a Godslayer Greatsword, which is going to stun lock me every time they hit me, so there's some moments here where I'll be going in to deliver some high damage attacks on the Giant Crusher player and won't be able to do that just because of the host. So I am able to Frostbite the Giant Crusher, and here that's the jumping attack that I really wanted, but I did get knocked out of the air by the host. Maybe paying a little bit more attention to the host would have been the way to go, but in this particular invasion I wanted to just kind of get one Phantom down at a time and then save the host for last. So was able to do that there, and then here I land a jumping attack. Both my weapons are buffed, so we get quite a bit of damage there. Again, I don't really feel the dual jump attack nerf that we got in patch 1.09. It's definitely there, and there's maybe moments where you won't get killed with a one-shot where you might have before, but jump attacks are still strong, power stance weapons are still strong, so you should at least incorporate them if you're going for a power stance setup. You shouldn't be worried about it. In that particular invasion, I didn't have something like the Claw Talisman on hand or anything like that. So this next one is going to be a 2v1, and it's really focused on avoiding large AoE attacks in small spaces. So I have to deal with kind of the big gravity pull from the player with Radon swords. I'm still able to punish that just with the timing between the first and the second part of the Ash of War, and then I'm able to grab a trade just before the host unlocks me, and that's enough to kill the Phantom there. So I'm also using some zoning techniques, like if I want to heal, I'll use Chilling Mist, and that will discourage the host from running in and, you know, hitting me with some of their attacks, and I'll also be able to potentially frostbite them out of the AoE that they get with their Ash of War. So that's pretty nice. Being able to have the option to, you know, frostbite your opponent mid-attack really shifts the priority in your direction and can be a nice way to change things up. So there we were able to get both kills just with, you know, the different Ashes of War we had on hand and kind of punishing their aggression. And next up we have a trio here. It's kind of the Radon Festival before the Millennia boss fight, just a whole bunch of Radons here. So I do get a couple quick hits on both Phantoms, but it does leave me susceptible for a backstab. So I do kind of take that trade, and I am quickly understanding that bleed is going to be a factor here. I don't want to get blood loss procced. It's going to stun lock me, leaving me open to more hits, and I just, you know, I'm probably going to die in the process. So I'm trying to at least stun lock them a couple times, get some chip damage in the process, but I know that this is going to be a difficult fight, especially given the amount of high bleed weapons at play here. So this is really the only strategy you can go for, is running into this room and running out of this room, because there's no PvE and there's just not a lot of space down here. I guess you can go up the elevator too, but typically I don't do that. So I go ahead and try to get a little bit more chip damage, get some frostbitten, and I feel like my setup, while good, might not be as good as going into a doorway and releasing the Thunderstorm Ash of War, and that turns out to just be pretty effective. We get 2 out of 3, and third one does get pretty aggressive. I give them a nice friendly wave, and they do kind of, you know, come in still out for blood. I think I would have killed them had I been able to just stay in the world a little bit longer, but, you know, sometimes it's just worth it to know what weapon is going to be the most appropriate for a given situation, and before the Melania boss fight, I would say it's a good idea to take advantage of something like the Thunderstorm Ash of War on the Stormhawk axe, because, you know, gradual chip damage is going to be difficult in a space like that. So next up we have a 2v1. The host here is doing a pretty good job of reaction rolling. Some things they are panic rolling, but my timing is, you know, not quite perfect, and the, you know, kind of continuous iframes they're taking advantage of is doing them some favors. So they do switch over to the Hand of Melania Ash of War, which allows me to trade into a jumping attack, and there I was hoping to roll catch with the Flaming Strike Ash of War, but it's not quite there, and here I'm able to just get a quick roll catch with a crouching light attack. So I definitely like the crouching light attack for the one-handed option on the large club. I think it's, you know, it comes out pretty fast, it has a nice wide sweeping AoE. It's not quite the range that I would really hope, but it's pretty strong, and you'll definitely be able to take advantage of that and get some kills in the process. Next up we have another 3v1, and this is definitely a gang squad that's just kind of hanging out here with no PvE. So I'm trying to at least kind of find the weakest link, figure out where, you know, I can get some burst damage and potentially turn it into a 2v1 rather than a 3v1. And they are pretty aggressive, and they don't have a ton of poise, so Flaming Strike is going to be my friend throughout this for sure, where if I can, you know, stun lock them with the first part and then potentially hit them with the follow-up, it's going to do quite a bit of damage and put me in a good spot to, you know, slow things down a little bit, not get hit by too much damage in the process, and then potentially turn it into a 2v1. But I do need to worry about the dual Crozier hammers, because they are going for a lot of jumping attacks, and I think here I do feel the fact that they are nerfed. I often would have gotten one shot by that kind of power stance jumping attack, but with patch 1.09 I don't think that's really the case here, and where I get hit with it, it does do, you know, a massive chunk of my health, but I'm not dead. So that turns out to be pretty solid and allows me to get it to a 2v1 just with a trade there. And then here you might say, Sleepy, that was a horrible time to go into your menu, what are you doing? You'd be absolutely right, that was. I also didn't have the R3 pressed, so I couldn't see what was going on. You know, sometimes you just think you have the space, you don't see the player off screen, and you assume that they're further away than they are. So bad time to go into the menu, but I didn't die in the process. I did get punished though, so definitely be wary of that. Just kind of a PSA right there. But I am able to get a couple quick hits in, take advantage of the quicker speed associated with just the one-handed moveset, and I do get left open for a backstab while going for just the final hit on the Phantom, but definitely worth it, didn't die in the process. And here we go for the chase down. I have also noticed that with the one-handed attack on the large club, you can oftentimes hit them, you know, once with a light attack, and then the follow-up attack, because the timing's different, they might delay their roll thinking you're going to delay their attack, and then they will just kind of end up getting hit because it comes out so much faster now. So that's something to keep an eye out for. We'll look at that a little bit more closely in Duels, where it's very obvious, but I really enjoy that fact. And there is a true combo now associated with one of the great hammers, neither the ones that I've been using, but you can at least take advantage of some of the faster frames associated with the large club, or, you know, just great hammers in general now. So here I'm able to get a quick Flaming Strike out and just take care of the Phantom, and then the jumping attack still delivering, you know, upwards of 700 damage, and that's enough to take out the host. Next up we have a 2v1, and I don't rush this one too much. I just see a lone host, and they are rune arced, but I'm thinking there might be another Phantom in the mix, and I'd rather take it as like a 2v1 rather than just a one-on-one. I do need to wait a little bit just because they do trigger the column that sends that Frosty Mist my way, but they do trigger it again, which means I'm able to kind of come in. I am trying to be hyper aware of that just because I don't want to get hit by it. I do manage to get a quick trade with the player with the greatsword, and then do manage to get a jumping attack. And just the little bit of extra range you can see there on that jumping attack, I was kind of surprised that it did connect, but it was enough to take out the Phantom. And then here just we get the Flaming Strike roll catch, which is enough to take out the host there. So I was pretty happy with that. It wasn't too difficult, but it was just kind of a nice demonstration of the little bit of extra range that you get with the large club. Next up we have another 2v1, and I would say this is probably a good example of when, you know, the large club is a little bit more difficult to deal with, and while we do have the buff to the speed, switching over to something like a thrusting sword or just something that's a little bit faster, a little bit better at roll catching can be helpful. So I'm really focusing on the Phantom here, and potentially that was a bad move. Maybe I should have gone for the host a little bit more, but if you're familiar with my content, I frequently will go for the Phantom first and just kind of delay killing the host as long as possible. And here we can see they have decent reaction rolls, and the decent reaction rolls, or just kind of unpredictable roll timing, does allow them to stay alive a little bit longer than I would like them to, and they are able to just kind of punish my aggression with the Orodovis Greatsword, Ash of War. So that makes things pretty difficult, and in that moment, had I weapon swapped over to a thrusting sword, I think I would have been able to take them out a little bit more quickly. They were very low health, and just kind of sticking with the Great Club can be a little bit detrimental when you have somebody that has decent roll timing and you have another host to contend with as well. So they've realized that the Orodovis Greatsword Ash of War is effective, so they're kind of continuously using it. I need to be kind of wary of that, and then we also do get some Rot Breath in the mix, so I definitely need to back off. I try to take advantage of kind of the low visibility there and land a jumping attack, so that was effective. I do, you know, play a little less aggressively against this Phantom now that I know they're going to go for an Ash of War that has a ton of hyper armor. And here I'm just about to kill them, but I do get kind of caught in the Rot Breath again and really need to regroup. So switching over to the boluses just so I can get rid of the Rot Breath is going to be pretty helpful, and then just healing up. If they had been more aggressive in that moment, they might have been in a better spot. There I get poise broken from the Lightning Bolt, which I wasn't expecting, but I am able to get the Freezing Pot off on the Phantom. And here they do go for the kind of Spectral Tail, and while that does have a ton of hyper armor, it's not going to help you really if you're dead. So that was a nice moment where I was able to just kind of trade in that with both weapons at the same time, take advantage of the power stance, high damage moments, and take care of the Phantom, who was about to hit me with something with a lot of hyper armor. So had they not died, it definitely would have been a trade that I would have lost. So nice kind of moment there where I'm able to be just a little bit quicker than the Phantom. And then here I begin kind of the chase down process. Again, you know, switching to something like a thrusting sword or just throwing a frost pot is a nice way to take advantage of the fact that you don't have an incredibly fast weapon and kind of mix things up a little bit. So this next 3v1 is going to involve a lot of magic and not a ton of vigor. So we do have, you know, kind of the potential to very quickly melt our opponents, and especially at 138 where damage output is pretty high, it's, you know, very important to be running at least 60 vigor. So we have this player that kind of stays aggressive while they have almost no HP, and I'm able to use Flaming Strike just to kind of zone the rest of the players, keep them off my back while still, you know, quickly taking away that last bit of HP from the Phantom that was pretty low on health. And then here I switch over to the Great Stars with Sacred Blade, and then trade into Moonveil, which is enough to take care of that Phantom. So being able to just kind of hit them with a ranged attack was pretty nice. And then at this point, I really just wanted the Ravioli Step with the host. So you'll see me going for more of them and just being out of range slightly. Definitely not necessary, but I just thought, you know, why not incorporate the Ravioli Step? I feel like it looks kind of good with the Sacred Blade Great Stars. And here, again, just slightly out of range. Maybe with a large club it would have been possible. And then here we get a trade, 660 damage, does almost all their HP, so that's good knowledge to have. We, you know, miss with the Sacred Blade. I feel like the tracking on it is maybe not as good as it once was. I don't know if that has changed, but that's just kind of my inclination. And then here, finally, we do get the Ravioli Step for the finish, so definitely fun invasion there. And then this next one is just a one-on-one, and I wanted to include it because it demonstrates just kind of how vicious the Great Hammers can be now that they have a slight speed buff, and what happens if you just kind of stay aggressive or don't roll away and try to reset to neutral. So I'm able to just hit them repeatedly and either roll catch them or hit their block, and they don't really have much of a chance. And we'll see some more similar stuff like that happen in the Duels section as well, where you may just be able to stun lock them over and over and over again. It almost feels like a little bit unfair, even though you're not actually true comboing them. The fact that it's a little bit faster, and maybe the fact that people aren't used to the timing yet of the faster moveset, it's just really powerful. So this next one is another 3v1, and here we're able to just deliver a ton of damage very quickly. The buff with Sacred Blade is very strong, and it's nice to have a projectile in the mix as well. There I go for a very quick turn and burn and just hit them twice for around, like 1,000 damage, and that's enough to finish off the host. So this next invasion just kind of cracked me up. So we have a very high intelligence blue. They go for Moonveil and then immediately fall off the edge. And then we also have a Phantom and a Host that are not super aggressive. The Host is willing to kind of just like watch what happens as I fight the Phantom. So I always think that's kind of fun, and the blue at the beginning just kind of cracked me up a little bit. So we do go for a quick turn and burn trade against the Phantom. They are using Bloodhound Step, which does make this a little bit more difficult, but we can win most trades. I particularly enjoy using Flaming Strike against players with Bloodhound Step, because if they Bloodhound Step around you, a lot of times the Lingering Fire AoE will catch them after the end of the Bloodhound Step. So that can be nice, just incorporating delayed attacks or just waiting longer than you might normally, and going for trades are all good options. But eventually they don't go for Bloodhound Step when they should have, and I'm able to get the kill. Here, I didn't know that they weren't ready, so I just kind of quickly apologized, let them heal up, and once they're ready, I feel like I can kind of become aggressive, and they're probably not in a great spot. They've just got a staff and no help, and they seem fine with being in a small space, so not the best mage approach, I would say, but I'm able to just kind of very quickly land Flaming Strike and finish them off. So that is just a pretty quick 3v1 that wasn't too difficult. Next up we have a 2v1, and this one also kind of cracked me up. So this player, I think, was a little bit slow on the uptake with that kind of magic bow attack, and they aren't too worried about their health, which I think they probably should be. And then this was just kind of funny. They Gravitas me over so I could kind of come and trade with them and kill them, and then the Host comes in also not healing, and we're able to finish off that 2v1 without too much difficulty. Next up, we have the dual portion of this showcase, and here we're going to be using the one-handed moveset with the offhand shield. We're not using the offhand shield too much. Occasionally I'll go for guard counters just for fun, maybe a parry here or there, but really I think having a large club in your offhand makes a little bit more sense, so you have access to L1s with slightly slower timing. So here we have a player that pulls out shield, so I know they may be going for parries. Here I missed the backstab, but I was really happy about this. I think we had a pretty good connection. I got the read on the backstab and was able to punish it with a backstab. Or I got the read on the parry rather. So that just felt like Dark Souls 3. It was really nice to be able to get a punish again that looked kind of like that. It's not so common in Elden Ring. I wouldn't mind if the frames on the parries were just a little bit longer so that you would be more susceptible to a backstab, and going for a parry would be a little bit more punishing. So here we have a player going for the Morgoth's Curve Sword, and there I was able to get 2 light attacks and then roll catch with a heavy attack, and that was definitely a strategy I found to be pretty effective in Duels, is going for that light attack, and then potentially delayed heavy attack. And those 3 hits together can just do a ton of damage. I felt like, I played a lot with this particular build in the arena and just was able to, kind of keep up with most people. There were occasions where I would feel like I needed to switch over to a thrusting sword just because the build that I was playing against was, maybe light roll build that was really passive or something. But for the most part, I felt like Great Hammers were viable in the arena, and it was really refreshing. They feel almost like the Great Swords before the patch 1.09 speed buff that they got. So being able to use Great Hammers, in an effective, quick moveset, and just, especially with the range of the large club, it felt pretty good, and I was pretty happy about it. So this is just kind of a player here that stayed really aggressive, and you can kind of see the vortexing potential of the large club, where I'm able to just kind of, vary my timing a little bit, but basically flawless them just because they stayed pretty aggressive, and their timing for openings that they thought they had with a fast weapon weren't there anymore because the moveset is different. So the moveset isn't different, but the timing is different. So that was just like, I felt like that had happened way more than, had ever been possible on Great Hammers. And that was just a really nice moment. I'd be curious to see how many more people use Great Hammers in the arena moving forward. But it might just be that they're better now because the timing is different and it throws people off. But long term, I would hope that, the faster timing does stay pretty effective. So this next player was definitely pretty skilled and pretty difficult to play against. I think heavy thrusting swords in the right hands can be pretty hard to deal with just in general. They're kind of a weird moveset. I should probably do a showcase on one just so I can better understand it, but I am able to get a backstab on their Piercing Fang, which, the recovery frames on it do leave you open to that, and I definitely recommend rolling around and kind of into it, definitely not away from it. So that is a nice moment there where I was able to get a backstab and then switch talismans, which kind of baits them into a jumping attack that I can punish. Next up, we have a player that's using some pretty fast weapons. We do need to be aware of that and just try to bait them into attacks that we can punish. So you'll see me going for a lot of attacks that do get whiffed in the process, but that is kind of part of the plan. Sometimes, they don't expect you to go for the third light attack when they're clearly out of range, and so they try to come in to punish your second light attack, and it works out pretty well. So we do have to be aware of the Glintstone Chris as well as Carrion Slicer. Carrion Slicer is definitely a little bit more easy to read and just kind of punish. We can assume that if they're running in, they're going to go for a Slicer attack, and we'll be able to just kind of trade with that. And the way Carrion Slicer is now means that it's not as dangerous as it once was, and we're finally able to just get a jumping light attack. And this next player was using a large club, so I was happy to see that, but I wasn't maybe thrilled with their play style. So they do go for a buff just to boost their physical damage negation, and I do try to counter that a little bit by throwing a freezing pot. So I definitely recommend that if you can get your opponent frostbitten, especially if they're using something that's going to negate some of your physical damage. You'll actually get some of that physical damage back just from the frostbite. So here I was able to hit them, just kind of get the read on the range just a little bit better. So they go for attack and mine comes slightly after, but it's slightly closer. So I'm able to take out a decent amount of their health. And then I am trying to play a little bit patiently as well. I don't really know what type of things they have up their sleeve. And here we can see that patience pays off, where they go for the Flaming Strike, Ash of War twice in a row. And then here they go for Erdtreed Heal, which I'm not a huge fan of in the arena. It feels, pretty powerful, maybe a little bit too powerful. The fact that you can be, 75% of your health can be lost, and then you can just very, very quickly go for Erdtreed Heal. It wasn't like they were that far away from me either. With how quick you can kind of get all that HP back, and the fact that a player can punish you with like a jumping heavy and it still doesn't matter that much, I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit more salty about it than I should be, but I'm never a huge fan of the healing incantations in the arena, especially one like that where you get so much health back with, it's very high reward, very little risk. So I am able to finally take care of that opponent. And then this next player was also somebody that had a pretty good connection. I was able to space quite a bit better than I thought that I would be able to. There I was able to go for a jumping heavy to knock them out of something that typically has a lot of hyper armor, and I'm also just trying to bait them into some attacks and just kind of space appropriately. So there, that spacing was just, it must have been a good connection, because being able to not get hit by their pretty long attack and then being able to hit them with the Chilling Mist Ash of War was fantastic. And this next player is going to be a great sword user and also have a parry shield, so I am kind of wary about that. Anytime I see a small shield, I really anytime I see a shield that's not a great shield, I assume that they're potentially going for parries. And that is kind of a interesting element of the fact that if you're going for the one-handed moveset and you just have an offhand shield, even if you don't really use that shield much, it can change the psychology of your opponent. So just the presence of a shield, even if you're not going for parries a lot, can be useful in kind of forcing your opponent to be a little bit more reserved with their attacks. So if you made it this far, I just hope you enjoy this last one. I certainly did. We have a Vike Spear player, and they go for kind of a classic combo here where, you know, we space each other a little bit. They go for a running attack. They do manage to hit me, and then they go for their Ash of War, which just combos really well into a backstab, and that combos kind of predictably into a disconnect. So just kind of a fun arena moment there. For this build, we used a couple different setups. I would say my favorite was definitely the one-handed move set for the large club. So just being able to have access to the speed of the one-handed move set, but then having an offhand large club as well, so you can switch things up with something a little bit more slow with higher damage. And then obviously the jumping L1 is still very strong. Jumping attacks were nerfed in patch 1.09, but I didn't feel it too much. I found that jumping attacks were still quite strong. The fact that you're hitting them with two weapons at the same time just means you're going to do a lot of damage. So that was pretty cool, and we're going to go ahead and look at the setup here. The weight load for this build allows for a couple different options. So you can run 2 large clubs. You can also do a large club and a shield, which is something that I did. So that allows, you know, not a bad setup if you want to go for the two-handed move set, and then you can also incorporate parries or just have the shield for the buff when you get low on health. So that's one option. And then I also used the Great Stars, which are pretty fun too. They don't have quite the same range as the large club, but they're still good. And those are pretty much the main setups I use for this build in terms of weapons, but we'll take a look at the stats as well. A lot of times I'll run builds at 125, but I wasn't getting invasions as fast at 125, so I did bump this up to 138, which does allow you to invade both 125 players and 150 players. So for that, I just ran with 60 figure, 35 endurance, since there is, you know, quite a lot of weight associated with this higher poise build with larger weapons, and then 62 strength. You can really dump more into strength if you want to, and then 20 dexterity. That's not for any of these weapons, but just being able to switch over to something like an Anspur Rapier can be helpful sometimes in invasion, so I like to have that option available. We do hit the 101 poise with this particular armor setup, so we have the Banished Knight Helm Altered, the Banished Knight Armor, the Tree Sentinel Gauntlets, as well as the Tree Sentinel Greaves, and then we have Great Jar's Arsenal to boost our equip load, Crimson Hammer Medallion +2, and then Bulgo Talisman to bring us up to 101 poise. And then this is a good swap around talisman, so you can do Shard of Alexander. You could also do Claw Talisman if you're going to go for more jumping attacks. If you see somebody with, you know, Vike Spear, it might not be a bad idea to switch over to this one. If you see a lot of bleed, this is a good one to have on hand as well. And then if you want to boost the amount of HP you're going to get from a flask, this is a good one to have on hand as well. That pretty much covers everything that I wanted to say about the build. If you have any requests for future builds, definitely let me know. I'll probably be exploring some of the other weapons that were changed in patch 1.09. But yeah, that's all I've got for today. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a good one.